Here we go.
Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Red Rum. All work and no podcast makes Jack a dull boy. Let's kill the light and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Soma. A pill for your troubles, morality in a bottle. Leap into a new world with Soma. Try the new strawberry ice cream flavor. Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers, writers, actors. I'm a full-time writer-director for the last, day or two. And Todd's a full-time producer, musician. We bring all of that vast wealth of knowledge to make fun of movies and tell you how they did them for the worse. No, not at all. We like to look at a film and see where it's working. Maybe sometimes, where we don't think it's working. There are very few perfect movies, and that's okay. I don't think it's a knock on anyone to point out like, this thing didn't work for me. I think that's just the nature of art, especially such an art like this. Movies are just so, widespread that we all have an opinion. We all have a thought about, this didn't click for me, or that performance didn't click for me. That dialogue didn't make sense to me, or I just didn't follow the story at all. I don't think it's a knock on a storyteller to be like, this, didn't quite make sense to me. Even though I still love the movie, right? You can do both. You can say, I love a thing with reservations. And I think that's just part of, appreciating art as much as anything. I'm sure there's plenty of paintings, Da Vinci finished, and it was like, I got better in me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also, it's I don't want to be one of those people that sits on your high horse and says this sucks and whatever. That's not what we do. We just, like Wes said, talk about what works for us and what doesn't, but also where we think does this hold up? And remember, in a lot of circumstances when a movie's being made, you have to take into account I mean, honestly, what year is it? What came before it? What has come since, and how things have changed. I mean, you go back and you listen to the Beatles, and you can pick out stuff where you're thinking that wasn't their best. I Want to Hold Your Hand was great for the time, but it's definitely not their best work. And that's not to say that it wasn't great for its time too. So, and we like to call those things out as well.
Great point. So what are we going to be adventuring into today, man?
Today we are covering Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause and go watch it. I believe it is streaming on HBO Go, so you should be able to see it, because we're going to spoil a lot of things. Yes,
we're going to take a look at a number of things. Certainly some of the cinematography and directing, the way Nolan cheats for speed. I'll define what I mean by that later. We'll also look at some of the story and writing, a lot actually of the story and writing. Batman versus Joker, the philosophical stakes in the film, Joker's tests, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. When the Joker wreaks havoc and chaos on the people of Gotham, Batman must accept one of the greatest psychological and physical tests of his ability to fight injustice. It's directed by Christopher Nolan, screenplay by Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan, cinematography by Wally Pfister, featuring Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne, Heath Ledger as Joker, Maggie Gyllenhaal as Rachel, Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent, Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon, Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, and Michael Caine as Alfred.
But I know the truth. There's no going back. You've changed things. Forever.
Then why do you want to kill me?
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No, you complete me.
You're garbage. You kills for money.
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be. To them, you're just a freak. Like me. They need you right now. But when they don't, they'll cast you out. Like a leper. You see, their morals, their code, it's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
Where's Dent?
You have all these rules, and you think they'll save you.
He's in control. I have one rule.
Oh, then that's the rule you'll have to break to know the truth.
Which is?
The only sensible way to live in this world is without rules. And tonight, you're gonna break your one rule.
I'm considering it.
No, there's only minutes left, so you're gonna have to play my little game if you want to save one of them.
Yeah.
You know, for a while there, I thought you really were, Dent. The way you threw yourself after her. Look at you go! Does Harvey know about you and his little bunny?
Where are they?
Killing is making a choice.
Where are they?
Choose between one life or the other. Your friend, the district attorney, or his blushing bride to be.
You have nothing to threaten me with. Nothing to do with all your strength. Don't worry, I'm gonna tell you where they are. Both of them. And that's the point. You'll have to choose. He's at 250 52nd Street, and she's on Avenue X. That's just a...
Oh, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Todd. I don't know. Let it fly, man. Is it great?
So I'm glad you played that clip because that's probably my favorite clip in the entire film, to be honest. Let me start off with the good, and then I'll go into the less than good. The good for me is obviously Heath Ledger's performance is transcendent, and I can only imagine what it's like to play a character like this, especially the way that it's written too. It's not like Keaton's version of the Joker, where he's just a bad guy, right? And I know there's more backstory with him and everything, but in this case, we basically have no backstory. He just is this way, and it's fun. It's so brilliant how we get glimpses of a backstory, but we know it's baloney because they're different every single time. I think that the way that the Joker is played in this film is probably unlike anything else that we'll ever get. It's just because it was done first, right? And it was done in a way to make us think that we're getting getting explanation for things, but we really aren't. And I think that Alfred puts it perfectly, and this goes into the excellence in how it's written when he says some men just want to watch the world burn. Sometimes there is no explanation as to why people are the way they are, and we get that through the many stories of why the Joker's face is how it is, right? Why the scars are there. We think we're getting an explanation, and we can pick whatever we want, but it's not necessarily the case. So he constantly remains a mystery. So anyway, I think that it's written really beautifully, and 90% of it is like the layout of everything, the layout of the characters. I love that Rachel knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman at this point. I love that. So we're not trying to hide that anymore necessarily. So he can kind of remain in the shadows with everyone else, but with her, it's front and center, and she's aware of that. That makes the stakes even higher, right? When in this scenario that follows right after this scene, and then I love that I love Alfred, or not Alfred. I'm sorry. I love Lucius's character as well. When when the guy is trying to blackmail Bruce Wayne, and he says, "Let me get this straight." That whole monologue scenario was really great. And it's almost like it reminds us that Bruce Wayne has a team. It's not just one person. And I think that the casting of Morgan Freeman in this role is perfect because he can be this person who's just nonchalant about everything. He just has that way about him. And yet he gets stuff done, which is his character. And so I love all of that. And then some, and we could talk about all the other stuff. Like, the Batmobile is amazing. And the Bat cycle that pops out of it when the Batmobile itself is destroyed or whatever it is. I call it the Batmobile, but it's the Bat Tank.
Yeah, it's the Bat Tank, right?
Yeah, which like, yeah, it's incredible. So anyway, all of that is really brilliantly done and incredibly put together. I'm going to go out on a limb here,
Okay.
though, and say that I do not like Christian Bale as Batman.
Ooh.
I just don't. I never really have. And then watching this again has completely reminded myself that I just don't like it, you know? And I don't think that I have any other reason, because I love Christian Bale. I think he's an incredible actor. In fact, in 99 out of 100 films, like, he's the one I look at, you know? You look at Ford v Ferrari, you look at like any other film that he's done, The Machinist, American Psycho, like, he's just brilliant. And the craft that he brings to his performances is unparalleled. It really is. That being said, like, I cannot get over his voice. His voice drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. It's pointless. It's stupid. And I just don't want to hear him talk. In fact, I feel like, I honestly feel like 80% of the time he's saying things, it could have been fine if he said nothing. You know, there are some times where he has to say things and you know, he needs to give some piece of information or ask a question, and I get that. But a lot of times it's just pushing everything forward when it doesn't necessarily need to. And that would have been nice to have him say less, even though he doesn't say a whole lot as Batman, to have him say even less as Batman, to be more mysterious to everybody around him, not necessarily to us as the viewer, but to the people he's interacting with. But yeah, I mean, all his conversations with the commissioner and everything, I'm just like, God, I can't take it. It drives me crazy, and it takes me out of it completely. So that, and then also some of the dialogue feels a little too exposition-y, and where you're giving too much to me, and I don't, it feels dated. That's how it feels. Some of the dialogue feels dated because it feels like I'm being given something that I kind of already know. And I also tried to, while I was watching it, I tried to take myself out of, I already know the story and I already know what's going to happen, and just watching it as a film. And even then, I just feel like you didn't need to put that in there. You didn't need to explain that to me or say that this happened before, and so now this. Like, in a film like this, that's a trilogy. If you haven't seen the first one and you're watching the second one and you miss stuff, go watch the first one. Don't give me the backstory of the first one so that now I'm up to speed. Leave those people behind. Those people are not the reason you're making the second one, right? So that's, in a nutshell, what I'll say is that I think the Joker performance is incredible. I think that the writing is 90% amazing. The backstories they've given to everybody, the purposes or lack thereof they've given to people are incredible. The development of the characters are really amazing. But the writing in some places seems very dated. It completely takes me out of it. And Bale as Batman, I've never been a big fan, and I especially am not now after rewatching again. So
I'm going to lightly disagree.
Great. I like it.
I personally, he's my favorite Batman, personally. I am good to go with the voice. I disagree in the sense of, I don't think it's pointless. I think it is pointed to do the whole disguise your voice thing. Because to me, even having his chin exposed to me is like, I would be more okay with you pointing out like, that's dumb, right? Because if you're in a universe where you're a mass vigilante, you should be trying to disguise your voice around the people you see, you know, in your whatever disguised life. And so to me, it makes some sense that he's trying to disguise his voice. It doesn't make sense to me in other films when he doesn't. I'm like, I know we all just, you know, suspend our disbelief, but anyway, like there is one line in this film where I'm just like, it doesn't work, which is at the very end when he's trying to get out that gobbledygook dialogue of either, you know, die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. Yeah.
I just see the college humor version of this.
Oh, I haven't seen that, but
dude, it's so good.
But that's too much. That's a dialogue problem. I don't blame him. He got painted into a corner, and it's just like, I don't know how to get out of this room. Like I'm painted in the corner. And so, you know, apologies to Christian Bale for that. But at the same time, I always have understood why people hate the voice, like, because, you know, it is unique in its approach, and it's a lot. It is a lot. I think if I was going to harp on the dialogue, though, in terms of audio quality, the rest of the film, everyone else talking could have used a little more brightening. Like it can be a little hard to parse some of the dialogue, and this has become a Nolan staple at this point. And I don't think it pays dividends to do that in this particular film, especially when you start thinking about why. And so I will go right into the note that I had about cheating for speed. Like, this is a directing choice, right? One of the things with this film is that it's a breathless film. There's a lot of moving parts happening. And so you're having to find ways to keep momentum, because it's paramount to keep the runtime down, and to keep everything kind of popping along. If you spend too much time in one scene, especially early in the film, like I went and read the first, 30, 40 pages of the screenplay, just curious to see how it looked on the page. And man, it's a monster to me. Like, each paragraph is just packed with 1,000 things, and a lot of, I don't know, maybe half the stuff doesn't really make it onto the screen and with the same level of impact that it has in the script itself. Just as for example, when we first meet Batman, he bends the barrel of the gun, right, with his hand. I remember watching that this time, and I was like, wait, that's pretty outrageous. And then it doesn't really get explained in the script. That's like the first thing they point out is this thing he has under his hand, and they call it a mangle. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then when I rewatched the film afterwards, because the mangle is the same thing that he hooks into the van, right, and starts ripping it open before he gets tossed off, or he tosses himself off to avoid hitting the pillar. In the screenplay, it's like screamed at you, basically, like the mangle this, the mangle that. But in the film, there's like a 12 frame cut that you see a close up of this gadget underneath his arm. It doesn't really explain how it allowed him to do the barrel bending or any of that. It's just like he has a gadget. And I'm like, well, yeah, he's Batman. That's all he does is have gadgets. Like, this gadget doesn't mean anything to me visually. And so there's just all kinds of little things happening in the screenplay. But in order to keep the momentum and the runtime, flowing, you really have to find little ways of cutting out things that you don't really need, even though if you had the extra, 10, 15 minutes, you might do all these little things. And just as a couple of quick asides, like Bruce, whenever he talks to Lucius, he hands him these drawings of the new Batsuit. We don't actually see him hand him the drawings. Like, this is probably a 2-second cut that they could have inserted to be like, he pulls out, these drawings of a new Batsuit, and like, instead it's Lucius making a comment like, yeah, 3 pieces, kind of 90s. And he's like, looks down and he just has them in his hands already. And so that's just a very small cheat. And this film is filled with these little kind of things that they don't show you just to keep it going. Another weird one that is kind of dicey is when Joker early on dispatches the gangster, right? That's the first story he tells about his dad. Why so serious? And he's got the knife inside the gangster's mouth, and he's about to cut his mouth open and give him a permanent smile. And then we just kind of cut, and he just falls down dead. And it doesn't make any sense, right? Because you're not going to kill someone with the blade in their mouth. Like, you're going to very, much scar them for the rest of their life. But it's not a death blow. And so they never really let that pay off. They just kind of let him die, and you're just like, okay, he's dead. And we all move on. And I think we're okay with that. It's a little bumpy, but we're still so invested in the Joker that we're like, okay, we get it. And it's a weird thing to have the entire audience just kind of say, okay, yeah, we get it. Like, yeah, but it works. It works well enough anyway, to keep everything moving. But to your point, and this goes back to cheating for speed, there is so much more on the nose dialogue, exposition-y things to help keep things moving that they do here. And for a number of reasons, it also is because this is a mainstream pop film. So the audience is bigger and more general. Like, you can't go a little bit more intimate and indie. You have so many moving parts. You kind of have to repeat yourself a number of ways and a number of times, and because you trust the audience a little less, because this is the audience that shows up, Friday night, Saturday night, is only kind of half paying attention. They're eating popcorn, checking their phones. Like, you just trust the audience a lot less than you would an audience like us, and to anyone who's listening to us. We're going to be a little bit sharper and thinking and engaging with the film a lot more. And so there's so many things, like I'm not going to hammer this, to death, but stuff like the coin flipping thing, right? They keep making it a point of conversation. And you probably could have gotten away with saying that once, right? You shouldn't leave something like that up to chance. And they say it like 4 times throughout the film, and it just keeps getting pointed out. And, Harvey keeps kind of smirking like, I'm not. And then finally, Rachel says it again as he's getting hauled off before the big showdown. And he's like, I'm not, and slams on his face. And she looks at the coin, and she repeats a line that he says earlier in the film, right? You make your own luck. It's like, okay, yeah, we get it. It was a 2 double-headed coin, blah, blah, blah. But it's that kind of thing that I think a normal Nolan approach would be like, no, I'm going to, like, Interstellar isn't doing this to you. Like, yeah. Inception isn't even doing this to you, despite how much bigger Inception is conceptually. They're still more efficient in their exposition. But with the Batman, you do have to, be like, okay, we're going to belabor things a lot more than I would really like to, because I have a studio executive who's going to be watching this film, checking his phone, and I need to make sure he gets it too. And same thing, like the lower fifth thing, whenever that big showdown starts, right? The flames or whatever blocking off their avenue, their path. And the guy says, take lower fifth, right? And we cut to this other truck, and it's the guy kind of freaking out. Lower fifth, we'll be like turkeys on Thanksgiving down there, just to make sure there's danger down there. Nothing good happens on lower fifth. Just so that no one gets bumped off. But even with that sequence, I think he still leaves room for thinking on the audience's part. Like, in terms of the whole plan is never really spelled out. Even after, we get through the end of it, when we reveal that, Gordon is still alive, like, they never really spell out what the exact plan was. And so I still appreciate he found ways to leave our imagination blanks to fill in. And so, like, it all makes sense. I think that whole plan makes really good sense in hindsight. Like 90%, there's probably like a little wiggle room in there, be like, wait, yeah. But for the most part, right? So if you watch that sequence, with the understanding that Gordon is driving, you start to see some of the little things that they did that they had discussed and worked out in advance that maybe, freak you out, or you don't even think about, just watching. Another little thing that they do early in the film, that big gangster meeting that Joker interrupts, right? And Lau's on TV. They have Joker predict Batman grabbing Lau and making him talk, right? This is hidden exposition. It's kind of clever because it's this hidden, redundant messaging of what is going to happen and why it's happening. It's just there to make sure the audience doesn't get lost on a pretty, critical plot point. Because
He's a squealer.
Yeah, I know a squealer when I see one. And I love it. It's just a very subtle reinforcement of, not only that, of what that whole beat later on is, because he does, right? There's a whole segment, 10-minute segment of Bruce Wayne going to Hong Kong, kidnapping this guy, builds a cover story for the event, the adventure, gets the guy, gets him to talk. That's all really important. And it's also subtly reinforcing the importance of Harvey Dent, because without a good DA, the legal system is useless. And so he's trying to find ways to make sure this is a big, complicated moving piece for, a pop film. And so he does have to, I think he felt compelled anyway, to make sure a Batman, normie walking in can walk away with all the highlights. And yet, yeah, please.
Well, and how brilliant is that to give that line to Joker? Because now we see Joker as, when we see that happen, we see Joker as smart, not just a crazy guy that just wants to see the world burn, but like this guy has stuff figured out. He knows people. He understands what motivates people, whether that's cops or Batman or whomever, or gangsters, right? And so to give him that line, to call that out, and throughout this movie, he does such a brilliant job of giving insight to Joker to say as dialogue, right? And so when Joker says these things, we're like, oh, so then we start almost identifying with him a little bit. They'll cast you aside like lepers, and like he's not wrong. They do look at him as a freak. The only reason why Batman is in there is because of Gordon. Everybody else hates Batman and thinks he's a vigilante and wants to see him burn. And everybody else thinks that. But Gordon is the only one who's like, no, let him. He's under control, So
I love it. Yeah. And so let's discuss that, because this is going to get into the stuff that I love about this film, why it's my personal favorite Batman. Is because there's so much philosophically happening in this movie, way more than any superhero movie has a right to be thinking about, discussing, let alone executing to, I think, perfection. It's really good. And this will come back to Joker's backstory here in a little bit, if I can remember it. But the first thing that, that jumps out at me is Joker's tests. He has test galore throughout the entire film. Even the opening heist, right, is kind of this test that he puts his men through, right? Because if any one of them decides to not be a greedy piece of shit, he loses. But that's the whole point, is he's going to get everyone to kill everyone. And that's a selfish greed thing, right? We're not going to share, right? And he understands very well the mentality of these kind of men, and he's going to use it against them. And that's the important part too, is it reinforces exactly what you're saying. Joker is specific in his, psychological approaches with everyone. He doesn't blanket everybody with the same approach. And so he knows which buttons to push with which person. And I think that's really cool. So every test, I think, begins to hint at that and making people reveal themselves, who they truly are and what they truly value. And so another test is the 3 henchmen. After he kills the gangster, the mob boss, I don't know if that was a mob guy or what, but he breaks the pool cue, right? And he says, luckily we have an opening. Unfortunately, there's only one spot, and we're going to have tryouts. Make it fast, right? And he drops. I love how he just kind of weighs which one is better for killing, of the broken pool cue, and he drops it, right. And so now he's going to have these 3 guys who are presumably friends, kill each other for survival, and then even the mob itself, right? He's getting them to, y'all can go to jail and lose all your money, or you can pay me half. Right. And he doesn't want the money. He burns the money. It was never about the money. It was about sending a message, right? Is what he says. And it's funny because that line, when he says it, you could apply it to almost everyone in the movie. He's sending a message to literally everyone. Yes, Batman. Yes, the police, the mayor, and including all you gangsters. Like everyone's about to get a message and watch all this money burn. And Harvey or Rachel, right? That's a whole big philosophical test. It's a test specifically for Batman to make a choice, right? And I think I'll come back to that. My notes are scrambled. I was right up to the deadline, man. I was good. Yeah. And so another big test, of course, is the hospital, right? I can blow up a hospital, or citizens of Gotham, you can kill Reese, this guy who's about to expose who I'm claiming is my arch enemy, right? He doesn't want to kill him. What would he do without him? And so it's a beautiful test, right? Because now we get to see if normal people will murder, right? And they try. So maybe Joker's right about mankind. And right afterwards, Joker goes and talks to Dent, and I love that first line he says. He pulls his mask off, he sits, and he says, "Hi." It's kind of shy. It
wasn't personal.
Isn't this awkward? Oh, it's such a great delivery of one 2-letter word. Like it's just filled with so much context and character. Best line in any Batman film ever, hands down for me. And so, but what does he do? He hands Harvey Dent a gun. This is the guy who wants to kill him, and he hands him a gun. Joker gets Harvey Dent to become evil because he just needed the right push, is what he says at the end of the film, right? It's like gravity. Madness is like gravity. But how does he do it? What push is he giving him? And what he tells Harvey Dent is, the thing about chaos is it's fair. And this is appealing to Harvey Dent's sense of justice and the face of being blown apart and losing Rachel, pun intended. And it's just a beautiful, like, philosophical approach to a villain. Like, this guy, he is so well written. Yes, Heath Ledger deserves all the credit in the world for bringing this character to life. No question. But it wouldn't be as good if he didn't have as much behind it. Like, the writing behind the Joker is one of the greatest villains written of all time. Like, we could sit here and probably count on one hand who would be in company with him. This version of the Joker, not just the Joker itself, this version of the Joker, because all of it is meant to test the nature of man. He's deeply invested in proving that mankind is fallen and that social constructs are a ruse. And I think this is why we should never find out his backstory. This version of the Joker should never have a backstory, because it's beside the point. The point is, when crazy, chaotic stuff happens in our lives, is that going to be enough to push us over the edge? And so if we were to understand why the Joker's doing what he's doing, we can suddenly start to rationalize, everything away. Well, what you really need to do to solve this problem is X, Y, or Z. You can't, even if it doesn't excuse what's happened and the impact it's going to have on you. And I think the one thing you could apply for, you kind of referenced contextualizing film earlier. And one of the things that I think I'm not saying it's an absolute truth, but I think it's more than a coincidence. There's so many conversations around vigilantes. And this is one of my the other favorite aspect of this film is that it's that Batman is looking to be replaced. You don't find this in other superhero films. They're always, vigilant, and they never think about, what is my end game? What's my goal here? Bruce Wayne's goal has always been to restore law and order and justice and peace into society. It was never just I'm here to be vengeance. It was always, how can I get society back on its feet again? What can I do in the meantime? How can I clean up this city? Because anything that results in the necessity of me staying around forever is failed. That's a failed philosophy. That's a bad goal. And his goal in this film is, how can I get out of the mix? How can I get out of the workflow? And Harvey Dent becomes this goal. And it's so beautiful. And they had this conversation early in the film, and let's play it. It's the dinner table whenever Harvey, Rachel, Bruce, and the prima ballerina get into a philosophy. I love that it's this artist. It's a ballerina, and she's taking it to these two district attorneys.
How could you want to raise children in a city like this?
Well, I was raised here. I turned out okay.
Is Wayne Manor in the city limits?
The Palisades? Sure. You know, as our new DA, you might want to figure out where your jurisdiction ends.
I'm talking about the kind of city that idolizes a masked vigilante.
Gotham City is proud of an ordinary citizen standing up for what's right.
Gotham needs heroes like you, elected officials, not a man who thinks he is above the law.
Exactly. Who appointed the Batman?
We did. All of us who stood by and let scum take control of our city.
But this is a democracy, Harvey.
When their enemies were at the gates, the Romans would suspend democracy and appoint one man to protect the city. And it wasn't considered an honor, it was considered a public service.
Harvey, the last man that they appointed to protect the Republic was named Caesar, and he never gave up his power.
Okay, fine. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Look, whoever the Batman is, he doesn't want to do this for the rest of his life. How could he? Batman is looking for someone to take up his mantle.
Someone like you, Mr. Dent?
Maybe. If I'm up to it.
I love that. I love that this movie is exploring something that I'm not aware of any other superhero movie exploring, which is the nature of power, the nature of justice, and the role. Now, there are other films like Spider-Man, I think, does a light-handed job of saying the mass vigilante, is this right or wrong that someone is out there taking justice into their own hands, but not to this extent, because the conversation never gets to what is the role of Batman ultimately, and what's the goal, and how do we figure out how to replace Batman. But I love just that simple conversation is doing a lot, because it's asking those questions and then also giving the danger, the warning signs of what it means to take justice into your own hands and to appoint someone as an arbiter of morality, right? Because what happens if someone takes all that power and then never gives it back? And that conversation I find to be also illuminating of the era, the context of the era, because you start to factor in that this is all taking place in a post 9/11 era, right? And I think there's some commentary that he's lacing in there without ever touching, 9/11 or any of the actual symbols. Instead, he's looking at some of the ways the government's operating, and there's some light-handed, and my God, what a light touch to do it so seamlessly without violating the audience. Because a lot of people watching Batman are, especially in this era, probably going to be very pro war on terror, war on whatever it takes, right?
And Gotham is New York.
Gotham is New York. Great point. And so thinking about it in those terms, right? America is reeling from seemingly chaotic terrorism, right? And so then we have a reaction, right? Surveillance, overreach, right? The Patriot Act, which I would say is symbolized heavily, and the quote unquote, according to Bruce, government intel communications project, right? This is a cell phone spy mapping tech that Lucius makes and is used by Bruce. Lucius makes it for one specific thing, and Bruce says, "Oh, I can use that in a much bigger, grandiose way." And when Lucius finds that out, I love that he's the conscience, because Alfred can't be the conscience. Alfred is like a warning track that you're about to hit the wall, to mix a bunch of metaphors in here. But Lucius is the one who's like, "No, I'm walking away if you don't shut this down." And that's what you need, right? You need a conscience. And then Dent, maybe, and this, I wouldn't say I have this all mapped perfectly, but I think Dent might represent the American psyche, right? A strong sense of justice. That's our culture. Our culture has a very strong sense of justice. And it's just destroyed by one evil act, right? perhaps it's also a warning on the vigilante justice methodology, philosophy, right? Because you have two vigilantes now. You have Batman and you have Two-Face. And not everyone has the same rules. The rules that Batman had for himself, Harvey Dent did not have. He was letting his whims be dictated by the flip of a coin, right? And so vigilantism is absolutely not the solution to righting wrongs. And then maybe Batman is our justice system itself, right? Fighting to not break its moral code and debating like, at what point do I, let go of the power that I've built for myself? And I love that he hands that right back over to Lucius, right? Hey, maybe, I don't know what Lucius would represent necessarily. Maybe just the conscience of America. But it's fascinating to start applying some of these layers onto the film because it holds up really well to it. And I think it's not coincidental. Nolan seems to me the type of, philosopher that likes to think about the role of society combined with government and power. A lot of his films kind of deal with that in so many different ways. It's rarely left out of his thinking whenever he's writing these big films. And I think that's really, really cool. Yeah. And so, and again, I think that's why it's really important that Joker doesn't have a backstory, because if you start to fill in his backstory, then if you were to sit in here and start to paint him as, some kind of bin Laden figure or someone else, like it makes it too specific and personal. And you might start to say, well, one, it might pull you out of the story. But two, it might start to excuse some of the behaviors that you're seeing Joker do. And it's just, I think the most important aspect is, does it matter? Does it matter the reasoning sometimes? No. Your reaction, your response to, an evil action, an evil deed has nothing to do with what propelled it in the first place. Your reaction still needs to be based on morality and principles that you hold dear and that you say is to be implemented in your worldview. Because if you throw those away for any reason, then what is the difference between you and Joker?
Yeah.
None.
I mean, it almost excuses, it asks for an excuse if you know his real backstory. And that's not who he is, because it doesn't matter. It's like what Joker reminds me of in this film is the feeling you have on a two-lane highway of every now and then you have this thought of, I could just veer over into this oncoming traffic. And not that you'd ever do it, but it's that moment. It's that initial just thought that pops into your head, that synapse that connects with another synapse that says, I could create anarchy, but manifested in an actual full-fledged human being, right? That's the best way I could describe it, but that's how it feels. But I've never seen an actual actor disappear as well as I did in this. And it honestly doesn't matter that he has makeup on. It doesn't matter that he has scars. If it were actual Heath Ledger sitting there without makeup on, just looking at you in the camera, giving the same performance. In fact, I think I've seen a deep fake of that. Where someone actually put Heath Ledger's face on his face as Joker without the makeup or whatever. And you still are blown away about how absent he looks, even in a deep fake. It's crazy. I'll try to dig that up and find it and send it to you. But it's just, I've never seen an actor transcend himself or herself so much that they completely disappear to the point where they're unrecognizable in that regard. So and also I just want to say, I totally agree about all that. And I think it's super insightful what you said about what you've been saying about everything about like the writing and the additional layers that are put on. And like I said at the beginning of this, the time that this was made post 9/11, not that post 9/11, let's be honest, just a few years. And the correlation with, touching on a few things that I think that everybody was thinking at the time. The Patriot Act being a very big one, but just touching on it, like, and being conscious that Gotham is very much like New York, and you say Gotham, but you think New York, right? Like everything that you see is these big, huge buildings and concrete everywhere, and which sounds like every city, but then you look at the big wides that they have and all the bridges and the water around it. It's obviously New York.
New York.
Very insightful, man. I agree.
Really cool stuff. And lastly, cinematography I thought was interesting. Now I'm not going to go into all of it. I think most Nolan films kind of use a lot of the same ideas. Not all of them. I think Tenet stands apart pretty well, and Oppenheimer looks like it's going to stand apart. And I think it's the difference between, now that I'm thinking about it, Wally Pfister and getting a new cinematographer, because from Interstellar on, it's gotten more specific. It's gotten more specific to the stories that he's telling than when he was working with Wally Pfister. And Wally Pfister is like amazing. Don't get me wrong. He's a legend. But Hoyt van Hoytema came in, and suddenly, Interstellar looks like Interstellar. Dunkirk looks like Dunkirk. And Tenet is its own thing, right? The coloring, the contrast is its own thing. Whereas virtually every film from whatever Batman Begins through Dark Knight Rises all have the same kind of approach, texture, color. It all feels very much kind of in the same neighborhood. I would say.
Did Wally do all three of them?
Yeah. And I want to say he also probably did Prestige and Inception. Yeah. So they all feel like birds of a feather to me. I mean, they all look fine. They look good. Like I have nothing against them. I just like a really specific look for a specific film. That's attractive to me for whatever reason. But all that stuff aside, there's a couple little small things that they do. Well, one small thing and one obvious big thing. The small thing was when Harvey tips over, like he's tied, right? He's surrounded by all the gas, and he tips over the gas drum and falls on the floor, and his face is pressed to the floor, right? The gas starts to spill over, and there's this very small, slight rotation that happens as we're watching his face pressed on the floor, where the camera rotates clockwise, which makes the floor kind of rise a little bit above his head. And it's like it's pressing him, and it's so cool because otherwise, if you go the other direction, it might feel like he's free and that he could maybe, get up off the floor or raise his face off the gas, but rotating it the other way, pressing the floor into him, and it's like it's crushing him. Then suddenly it feels inescapable, and we're just like, oh God, like I know where this is headed. If you
That's such a great point, because that moment, I felt that too. I felt like, oh, just pick your head up. But because the camera tilted, I felt less like he could.
Yeah.
I felt the chair on top of him pushing him down. I felt like, I didn't even notice that. That's a great point.
So good. Joker dangling at the end. I think we've all noticed the camera rotating, right, to make him right side up. And on the one hand, like it's easier to orient the audience in order to intercut dialogue. If you're going to be cutting between him and Bruce or Batman, like it could probably become a little disorienting that you're trying to orient in your mind these two characters. So that helps. That's a problem solve. But of course, more emblematically, it reflects his worldview versus Batman's. Right, they're opposites in every way, and Joker, being an agent of chaos, lives upside down, and that to him is right side up. And so there's that, right? Because philosophically, Joker has no rules and does not believe in humanity, and he's looking for ways to prove his point. But this reflects their worldview versus Batman's, in that they're opposites in every way, right? Because philosophically, Batman does have rules. He does have constraints, even if it's just the one thing. Because we see him do some pretty rough stuff. I love that he breaks that guy's legs. That little bit of dialogue, You should drop him high enough to kill him. This isn't going to kill me. I'm counting on it. Boom. And that hurts. Like, just watching that clip is painful. But Batman, in other ways, they're complete opposites. Batman is a billionaire, right? Looks for ways to earn more money and invest it, right? Joker burns his. He burns a whole stack of it. He doesn't care about money whatsoever. Batman operates in the dark, right? Joker operates in broad daylight. And Batman is black and shadowy wardrobe, and operates in the shadows. Joker is bright, flashy, hides with makeup instead of a cowl. In just every single way, these they are just polar opposites of each other, and it's just heightened with the framing and the cinematography. It's just genius. The writing in this movie really is astounding. Like, it's just absolutely perfect in order to make sure everyone is, being pressed to the maximum, because every test that Joker puts everyone through is specific, right? Whether it's making Batman break his one rule, right? Racing to choose, right? That's what he says in the clip that we played at the start. You can choose, like, letting someone die is still breaking your rule. You have to choose who's going to die and who's going to live. You have to choose the life that you want, which is ironic because he wants the life with Rachel, but he also can't have it without Harvey. Therefore, he has to save Harvey if he's to have any chance of actually helping Gotham. That's his ultimate goal. It's not just to stop being Batman. It's to make sure Gotham gets on its feet. And Harvey is his route to a better Gotham.
I'm really glad you pointed that out, because I think a lot of people have asked that question, including myself when I first saw it, which is, why did he go to Dent? Why not go to Rachel if he knows he can save her? But it defeats the purpose, right? If he can't get to Dent, then it really doesn't matter, honestly, because there's nobody else. He can't be with Rachel either way. It's still selfish.
And I think that's what Joker was trying to get him to admit. I think Joker wanted him to save Rachel, because then it reinforces the idea that Batman wants to be Batman. He likes the power. He wants to hold on to the power. And he just enjoys, being a vigilante, instead of what he's representing of change in Gotham. And so I think in every time he gets tested by Joker, he wins, even whenever he does lose. I just wish because I couldn't agree more about the writing. I do wish that it could have been,
I only wanted any kind of exposition to be given by the Joker and Heath Ledger. Anything else that anybody gives me, I'm just like, I don't believe you. I'm sorry, I don't believe you. Including Maggie Gyllenhaal. I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care what you're saying. I just want to hear the Joker's talk for 2.5 hours. One thing I did want to point out that I'm surprised that you haven't yet, but when I say it, you're going to be like, oh yeah, unless you already knew it or already pointed that out. In the original Batman, well, not the original, the Michael Keaton Batman, how does the Joker die?
He falls.
He falls.
Yeah.
And not saved by Batman.
Oh.
I think this was an homage to that, and a concrete way to say that Batman will not be beaten to kill. He's going to save everyone, including the Joker, as opposed to the original Keaton one. I say the original just because Keaton is like the best, man. He's just awesome. Just because Joker does die by falling at the end. And at the end, he's laughing with the thing in his pocket, the laugh track in his pocket. And you can hear Heath Ledger laughing, the Joker laughing as he's falling, like, this is what I wanted, da 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 da. And then Batman actually saves him, as opposed to in the first one. I thought that was just an amazingly well thought out, brilliant ending to their relationship there.
Absolutely, because Joker is trying to get him to kill him, right? That's another test, is he stands out in open, in the street, clears the lane, right? And he's just sitting there, come on. Because he's willing to die to prove his point. He's willing to do whatever it takes to make Batman become evil, to push him over the ledge. There is no sacrifice he won't make, whether that's boatfuls of people or himself. And so, yeah, you're right. Like him falling is happiness of, yes, I win.
Mm-hmm.
He's dying and he's thinking that he wins.
He's like, yeah, this is the culmination of everything I've done.
Yeah.
And then no, he's like, I think at some point, maybe I'm wrong. I think he says, "Aw," at some point.
Oh, really?
Well, I want to say I heard that when he gets his foot gets caught by the grappling hook or whatever.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, so great. And then did Ledger die before this film was done?
I think it may have been released before or after he passed.
Okay.
But
because I just wonder, because we just end with Joker. It's just we're done with Joker.
Yeah.
And
it sucks. He also did go to make another film. I think some of the early thoughts were this film pushed him over the edge and like he took his own life. I don't think this is not normally the kind of stuff I get too deep into in terms of just my personal interest. I think it was maybe an accidental overdose of sleeping pills. I don't know that there's a lot of reason to suspect otherwise. And yeah, it sucks that so much got left on the table.
Like it doesn't feel like an ending to Joker.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, like, were they not able to film that, because this doesn't feel like something that Nolan would technically do,
I agree. I think the intention, if we can do some conjecturing here, is he was supposed to come back for the Dark Knight Rises, is what I would suspect. Like, can you imagine?
I think you're right.
Him and Bane coming together?
Oh my God.
Like, that's
what a film that would have been.
It would have been amazing. Instead we got what we got. And so, but that's kind of my headspace of like, the intention was, of course, not to let him go. Like, this is one of the best characters ever. Mm-hmm. Let's push it to the edge.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they just left it as is. Like,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
For sure. I think that's basically all I got. I love it for all those reasons. I love Heath Ledger just going all out. And what was interesting reading the script is there's not that much for him to work with. They just give him the dialogue. There's nothing on the page that says, play it this way, there's nothing predictive of what Heath Ledger does. The most I think they really give you is he's wearing makeup that covers the scars. Like was
Jack Nicklaus the last Joker?
The previous
before
one,
him? Yeah, but there was nobody between Nicklaus and
no.
So he could honestly, he had a full canvas to paint with. Yeah. He could have done like literally anything because Nicklaus was like, or Nicholson. Sorry,
yeah.
I get the golfer mixed up all the time.
Every time, I used to play
golf. Every time. I will always say it wrong. Nicholson was very specific, like, so Ledger could have done anything. I think that was probably a lot of fun for him. I feel like at the beginning of like saying, "Oh, okay, I could give this. This guy could be like this," and now no one can do the laugh.
Yeah,
he was the one. Like that was it, because Nicholson never really. I mean, he had a laugh.
Yeah,
but it was, I don't know.
It was still Nicholson. It still felt Jack.
Yes, it did. And so anyway.
And it was great for its time. Like, I was a kid when I watched that and fell in love with Batman for sure. But
but anyway, I was just curious in that regard. So yeah. Okay.
Nice. I think that's all I got, man. Final thoughts?
I mean, it's a brilliant film. The writing was fantastic. I just wanted more. I wanted even more Joker, and I still am not a Bale as Batman fan. I'm just not.
What did you think of the music, the use of music, the tone, right? The Shepherd tone to create tension seemed to be laced throughout. Did anything pop out to you in regards to sound design or music?
No, and that's why I loved it. You know what I mean? Like for a film like Inception or Interstellar, other Nolan films, that are very, I don't know, they're driven by the music. Like that is, it's a thing that they hearken back to.
Yeah.
I don't think that this film needed that. I think it would have taken me out of like, there's so many things that are trying to be said at the same time. And in the, like the line that you talked about earlier, where the Joker's talking to Dent and in the hospital, you know, the thing about fear is it's fair. I don't want to be thinking about anything sonic around me. I don't want to be thinking about music or like, oh, I love this sound or whatever. It's not like the docking scene of Interstellar where we have no dialogue. Essentially, we just have this stressful moment. Like, I need to be able to hear all the words that are said, because for the first 2 or 3 times I saw this film, I thought he said fear. I didn't think he said fair, which means nothing. It's like, that doesn't make sense, you know? And so I didn't really get it. So I need to be able to hear everything and not be thinking about other things like music. And so I think the fact that I didn't hear that, I didn't hear it, like too much, you know, music was a good thing. I thought it was perfectly placed. I thought the stressful moments were brought up like really well. And some of the clips you played too is perfect, you know, really well placed.
So good. I love it. I love the philosophical underpinnings of, it doesn't matter why Joker's doing what he's doing. The ultimate question is whether or not any of it would make it right to suspend law in order to accomplish your goal. Does breaking the law as the lawgiver make it right under any circumstance? Because if it doesn't make it right under the worst imaginable, nonsensical, chaotic circumstances, then there's never going to be a time that it makes sense to suspend habeas corpus or justice in order to accomplish getting the bad guy, so to speak. And so I love this whole approach, this philosophy blown right into the heart of a superhero film. Bravo, well done. I'm in love. Nice. What are you going to recommend this week?
Only because it's the most recent film I saw in a theater and I had a great time. I'm going to recommend the Mario Brothers movie. Had a great time seeing it, and especially with my kids. If you have kids, take them to go see it. Especially if you're in your 30s or 40s and you grew up playing Nintendo, it's fun.
Nice. I'm going to recommend the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves.
Nice.
I freaking loved it. If you've seen the preview and you're like, that looks terrible, it's to me the perfect trailer because it saves all the good stuff for the movie. It's a complete bait and switch. Well, maybe not a complete. It is a silly movie. Don't get me wrong. It's lighthearted. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it never makes fun of itself. And I think that's a big distinction. Like our friend Joe House said it very well, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's something along those lines of it does a good job of having fun with its ideas of being a D&D movie without ever becoming a mockery of the people that love it. And so that's a fine line to walk, because Dungeons and Dragons are nothing if not good for making fun of.
Do you need to have played it?
Zero. Like, if you have, you'll enjoy it for reasons that I don't know if I've ever played proper D&D. I grew up playing some RPG stuff, but I don't think it was ever actual Dungeons and Dragons. And we were never very good. We told all the stories, but this to me is also like the perfect campaign because it's full of like silly jokes that land more often than you would expect. Some good cameos. Really fun. It's just a fun movie. If you go in and say, this will be fun, like, you're going to have a great time because it's silly. It's fun. It's inventive. And it's the same guys. Oh my gosh. The same guys behind my favorite Spider-Man movie, which is Homecoming.
Nice.
And they did not do the following 2 films, Spider-Man films. And so I think they get it. And so I'm hoping this does well enough that they make 2 or 3 more films in this universe, because I think it's worth exploring. And I think they've only tapped into the mythology a little bit. And so, It's
We'll
fun.
see.
I think it's good for like kids. I think if you were to take your kids, they would have a great time. Like it's a good family movie. If you think of it in those terms, like the best family movie, you'll have a good time. Yeah.
Okay, 2 family movies. Great.
2 family movies.
Who would have thought that after the Dark Knight review?
What a day.
Yeah.
Nice. We have another art spotlight this week. This is a trailer for another short film that I just wrapped. It's called Wax. It's a very personal story. That's all I'll say about it. Watch the trailer. It won't reveal anything. You'll have to maybe eventually. I don't know if I'm ever releasing this publicly, but if I do, then cool. You can watch it then. But otherwise, just get it.
It's really good. It's really good. I will say
it's intense. Stay tuned. Next week, we have a listener request from Brockafine. I don't know that that's the real name, but someone tracked me down. They said they watched our episode Love Jones on YouTube and tracked my Instagram down, hit me in the DMs and said, hey, there's another Lorenz Tate movie I'd love for you to cover. It's called Menace to Society. So this is a 90s film. It's a black film by the Hughes brothers, who I love. I'm sure we'll talk about that more next week. So yeah, I think it's streaming right now on HBO or what's soon to be called Max. I don't know. This is not a smart move, HBO Max people. HBO is like prestigious. Like, what? Don't
They're
throw
just
that
changing
away.
it to Max.
They're just changing it to Max. So,
that's stupid.
Well done. Maybe it's it goes away so that it can come back later. Maybe it's one of those things. But yeah, you can stream Menace Society there. Probably a number of other places. Yeah, and if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to talk about, let us know what it be. And if you want to drop a note on this episode, tell us why you love, hate The Voice. Then you can go to you can drop a note on this episode at thepestlepodcast.com/The Dark Knight. Right.
God,
swear to me.
Just do something in post. I don't know. It drives me crazy. All right. And our quote of the day is from Frederick Bastiat. Is that how you pronounce that?
It is how you pronounce that.
Sweet. Love it. This is a good one. When law and morality contradict each other, the citizen has the cruel alternative of either losing his moral sense or losing his respect for the law. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I also put it, it's a question that's raised a lot in films about, the military, soldiers in the military who are given orders to do really difficult, terrible things and have to make that decision of, do I obey this order, which it's been ingrained in me, it's been beaten into me, and maybe sometimes physically, or do I, keep my morality and refuse and get in trouble? It's a terrible, terrible alternative to choose between.
It is. So Frederick Bastiat is a French philosopher from the 1850s. He wrote one of my favorite little booklets. It's really an essay. It's called The Law, and it's way ahead of its time. And it's a very insightful conversation about the nature of law, and where it comes from, why it exists, how do we execute it, what are the ways it gets perverted. And so I love just I was trying to figure out, who do we want to hear from in context of this movie? And I think that's so well put, right? When law and morality contradict each other, whenever you can't have both, like you're talking about, this moral injury that soldiers go through whenever they're tasked with, don't stop for the kid in the road. That means you can either obey your order or not. Like, I can take this child's life because I can't stop. Stopping might mean an ambush and the death of everyone around me, including myself. I can do that, or I can kill a child. What do you do, right? That's a moral injury. And so him making us ask these questions as citizens, right? When law and morality contradict each other, is it lawful to send people to jail for drugs? I don't know, but that's the moral order of the day. Therefore, it's the legal order of the day. The citizen has the cruel alternative to either lose his moral sense or lose respect for the law. We can't have both sometimes. And the citizens of Gotham, are struggling with this because what is it? Is it better to let a hospital blow up and kill a bunch of innocent people? Or is it better to take this man's life? I don't know, but we do know the law has let us down. And now we're having to figure out, do we break the law and save a hospital, or do we let a hospital explode? I love all these philosophical conundrums, which is what the Joker's so good at doing, right? Because he doesn't care about the result. Mm-hmm. He's the perfect, arbiter of implementing these tests.
Chaos.
Yeah.
And Batman's choice to go, it reminds me of Batman's choice to go save Harvey Dent over saving Rachel. He has the respect for the law. It felt like, if that was what it felt like he was making that decision. Now, I also am a firm believer that the law is not always 100% moral or fair and just. And in those cases, I think that I personally feel that the citizen has the right in some cases to call that out. Right. Yeah. Now, what they do with that, I don't know, that's a line in the sand that I'm not prepared to talk about on this podcast,
right?
To be honest, but just because it's a law does not mean that it is moral or just.
Absolutely.
In a lot of cases.
And what fascinates me about Gotham as a construct is this bigger question of what does it mean? What does it take to create a moral and just society itself? Because right now, the bulk of Gotham is illicit, right? It's all these illegal things happening with people in power doing it, compelling other people with power to do it. And how do you get to a place where in Austin, I can walk down the street at midnight and not really be worried for my safety? I can't say that about every single place in the world. Now, I do think the world at large gets a weird look from America, thinking that everything's danger. It's not. But there are certainly places that I would not walk, in broad daylight, let alone at midnight, around the world. I'm sorry if you catch me at midnight walking down the streets of Mogadishu, grab me and someone's going to beat some sense into me one way or another. Yeah. It's just not a safe place to be. And how do you get from Gotham to modern day New York? Modern day New York's pretty good. Like, I'm not saying it's the perfect emblematic, city of law and order, but it's better than Gotham. I think we can all agree on that minimum, right? There's plenty of people walking the streets at night that aren't overly concerned about getting jumped. And so it's at what point does the story we tell, and this is coming back to something we were talking about a few weeks ago, like our culture is a story that we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves that it's good to be moral, that it's good to obey the law, that it's good to stay between the lines in traffic. And it's just because it's been ingrained in us. And the story of America has only gotten stronger over time. Abraham Lincoln wasn't that concerned with habeas corpus. He was much more like Batman than anyone today. Like he was okay with destroying the press by controlling the message. Like, we have a lot of things that we love Lincoln for, but he wasn't. He was okay with the things happening in the Dark Knight. He was okay with suspending rights in order to justify the ends, right? But yet over time, we've gotten more and more obsessed with our own mythology. And that's, I think, for the better. We are obsessed with our First Amendment, right to free speech. I think that's a good thing. Like, we should be obsessed with it because the more, and so I don't know. I just find Gotham interesting as a case study, a thought experiment of how does one get Gotham to become overwhelmingly good instead of overwhelmingly bad? I don't know. I don't know what takes the sea change in order to make everything suddenly click into place. But Gotham is at that place. Gotham is at a place where it's so overwhelmingly ridden with crime that even the justice system doesn't work. I don't know. It's cool. It's interesting to think about. I certainly don't have any answers, which is, I guess safe for me.
I mean, the last thing I'll say, and I can't believe we've talked about this for over an hour and we haven't brought up the amazing scene of the hospital exploding and how that mistake is not a mistake. Oh, really?
Highly planned. So I don't know
the
when
explosion, the not working was highly planned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Highly planned and rehearsed. So the problem, and I was curious about this. I Googled it right before we went on.
Okay, good.
And so what happened was they wanted to get this shot, this crazy shot of an actor, Heath Ledger, walking out of the building and then destroying that building in one shot. And that's what happens. That's not like CG.
Yeah.
That Nolan doesn't, do that. And so they also needed to make sure that it was safe, right? And that it looked believable. And so they knew that they were going to have a pause, a break, and the explosions that were happening as he's walking out and whenever he climbs into the bus. And so in order to create some kind of moment, they gave him and this might have been partly his idea of how do I execute this break in the action? Okay, well, I'll just pretend that, the thing isn't working. So they rehearsed it a number of times, like a lot, because there's a camera move attached to that. And it's a big camera move. It's on a crane.
Yeah.
And so you have to execute it all flawlessly. And so, yeah, highly rehearsed, and that's just good performance. That's just him oh, what do I do? And I love that he's in this nurse's outfit. It's just all silly and crazy and frenetic. So yeah.
Okay. Cause I was watching it too. And I was like, how is this literally capturing magic in a bottle? Because then the movement after, as everything's exploding and the bus is driving off, I'm like, how was that done if it was a mistake planned? Because you don't just raise up a crane like that,
right?
Just oh, now go. It just doesn't happen that quickly. Yeah, so that's actually good to know.
And so that little pause gives him enough time to keep walking out and get to the bus and then do the bit. And then he sees it going and he kind of does a little startled, oh, and
the whole
yeah,
he flops his hands out to the side,
big wind flop. Yeah,
it's so good. It's brilliant. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for explaining that, putting that to rest.
So good.
Oh man. Thank you guys all for joining. Wes, thank you for your, as always, brilliant insight. Love it. Absolutely. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please leave us any kind of review, subscribe, all that stuff. Share us with your friends. It all helps tremendously. And join us next week. We'll be doing Menace to Society. Thanks for that suggestion there, Brockafine. Okay, until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.
I'm Batman. You can't make me break my rules.